Let's talk about the real reason Utah is going to be incredible next year. It's the Hoops Nerd Show. All right, guys, like always, make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel. If you haven't watched the Jazz for the last 2 to 3 years, you've been missing out on the development of one of the more important players on the Jazz, if not the most important player after Darren Peterson, and that's Keyonte George. Keyonte George, if you've been watching, especially last season, you saw development that was incredible for one of the more dynamic players on the Jazz. I know a lot of Jazz fans have been a little checked out with the tanking, but if you watched closely, Utah was quietly developing an all-star guard. Now, I want to dive into what Keyonte George is doing. All right, so here's Keyonte George's profile at dunks and threes, and I just wanted to go through some things on here that I think are really interesting. The first thing that jumps out when you look at Keyonte George, if you're looking for the negatives, is the defense. I think this is going to be much better, and I think this is a bigger sign of the Utah Jazz team defense being terrible intentionally to lose games the last 3-4 years. With Kyle Filipowski starting at center, with all the G League players the Jazz have gone through, that defense was terrible, and Keyonte George wasn't asked to defend all that hard. I mean, I'm sure the Jazz were looking at him and hoping he could show that defensive development, and that's going to be one of the key things for Keyonte George to develop as we go, and any sort of defensive improvement from Keyonte George will be huge in the upcoming season. The thing to get excited about, though, for Keyonte George is I don't think people realize just how good of a season Keyonte George had last year. Here is from 2025-26, the top scorers in the NBA per game. You look here, you have Luka Doncic, 33.5, SGA, 31.1, Anthony Edwards, 28. Guess who was the number 12 scorer in all of the NBA last season? Keyonte George, 23.6 points per game. And his percentages were very good. As a lead guard, the focal point of defenses, Keyonte George put up 45% from the field and 37.1% from three. We're going to dive into that a little bit, but that is way better than I think people are realizing. So when you go to Keyonte George, you'll see right here, he is in the 96th percentile, and that makes sense because he is the number 12 scorer in all of the league. But what probably a lot of people aren't realizing as well is that Keyonte George is in the 87th percentile in assists per game. Keyonte George, if you go here, 6.1 assists per game. So I'm going to do this really quick and pull this up. So Keyonte George is the number 12 scorer in the NBA. And then in terms of assists per game, Keyonte George at 22. If you're just looking at the raw stats of scoring and assists, Keyonte George is a top 25 player. And I don't know if there's a lot of lists out there that have him in the top 25. But if we're just talking raw stats, he's a top 25 player, if not top 20, when you consider the scoring with the averages. So just the raw stats are great. And the impact is the thing that we're going to look at now. So this is from 26 last season. He went from a minus 1.7 in 2024 on his estimated plus minus on dunks and threes. He jumped to a minus 0.3, and then last season jumped to plus 1.9. He is in his this is going to be his fourth season. If we get another jump from Keyonte George, I don't think the NBA is ready for just how good he is going to be offensively. And when you consider the fact that he is going to be on the floor with Darren Peterson, who's going to draw defenses, Lauri Markkanen, going to draw defenses, and Jaren Jackson Jr., as well as Yusuf Nurkic, who is going to be sort of a hub on offense, a do-it-all center that helps the offense improve. We are going to see some improvement on offense from from Keyonte George. I would be shocked if this doesn't jump up even more on this offensive estimated plus minus. And what's interesting is this minus 1.6 in 2024 in his defense was actually when he was coming off the bench. So he was coming off and playing against inferior opponents. But you could argue that with this being that low in that setting, if you put him on the floor with better teammates on the defensive end, when you consider that the Jazz will be in half-court sets more often because they won't be playing poorly on the offensive end, I could see his defense becoming a minus 1.6 again, possibly better if he just improves. And then if his offensive estimated plus minus jumps into like the 3s or 4s, you're looking at an absolutely incredible player. And if you do comparisons for Keyonte George, just raw stats, things get even more exciting. So I brought up a list of players I wanted to show that I don't think people are realizing just how close Keyonte George is. Right here is Keyonte George versus Devin Booker. And you can see Booker played 64 games. Keyonte George played 54 games last year. So, and then they pulled him because he was playing too well and they had to lose games. That tells you something, that alone. Anyways, 54 games before he got pulled for tanking. Devin Booker has the edge in points, 26.1. 3.9 total rebounds, although 3.7 for Keyonte George. That's almost identical. But then look at this, 6.1 assists for Keyonte George, 6 assists for Devin Booker. This is why people give the comparison to Devin Booker, but I would argue that Keyonte George has a chance to overtake him with more games and another step in his game. Steals per game, look at this. Keyonte George, actually a higher steal rate than Devin Booker. Block rate is the same. Field goal percentage is identical at 45.6. But then look at this. Devin Booker shot 33% from 3 last year. Keyonte George, 37.1. If you asked the average NBA fan or writer, if you were saying who was better between Keyonte George and Devin Booker, I bet you every single one would say Devin Booker. But the raw stats right here tell you another story. And Keyonte George isn't even done getting better. Free throw percentage, 89%, and then effective field goal percentage, 53% for Keyonte George. Devin Booker gets the edge with box plus minus and victories above replacement player, probably from the defensive end. So that's where Keyonte George will ironically need to catch up to Devin Booker is not offense. It's actually the defense. If he can do that and just keep the same stats from last year, then he overtakes Devin Booker pretty easily. All right, next, let's look at Austin Reaves, a player that just got a big contract from the Lakers. And obviously the Lakers get the advantage with the media and everything. But no one talks about Keyonte George as much as Austin Reaves is talked about on the national scale. But they should be talking about Keyonte George more. 23.6 points. Rebounds edge goes to Austin Reaves, but then look at this, 6.1 assists for Keyonte George. He is a better assist man and point guard than people give him credit for. And watch this go up. By the way, the first week of last season, Keyonte George in that first couple weeks was top 3 in the NBA in assists at just under 10 per game. Block per game goes to Austin Reaves. Field goal percentage is an edge to Austin Reaves right there at 49. Reaves is underrated offensively, obviously, but then 3-point percentage goes to Keyonte George, a full percentage point better. Free throw percentages to Keyonte George, and then box plus minus and victories VORP goes to Austin Reaves. I'm not going to say that. It's hard to say. And then effective field goal percentage, 56.7. This also makes me wonder if just being on a better team helps you out, because Keyonte George was playing on a team trying to lose, so of course the box plus minus is probably not going to be as high. When he's on a winning team, I can see these numbers getting better. I think that's a big reason why this isn't quite as big. All right, next player, Tyrese Maxey, who some people say is the absolute, that's where Keyonte George can go. Tyrese Maxey, who a lot of people have top 10, top 15 in their rankings. Points per game, 28.3 to Tyrese Maxey. Although if you dive into Tyrese Maxey, he is one of the league leaders in minutes per game. So he plays, let's just look at his minutes per game last season, 38 minutes per game compared to Keyonte George last season, who was, let's see, where'd that go? Right here. Let's go down to minutes per game, 33. So that's 5 extra minutes for, let's pull this up, for Tyrese Maxey. All right, so points per game goes to Maxey. If Keyonte George is more into the 3 more minutes per game, then he will close in on this. This is the level where we are hoping that Keyonte George can get, and I think is very attainable for Keyonte George if he takes another leap next year. Total rebounds goes to Maxey. Assists per game goes to Maxey. You got to remember, this is 38 minutes per game versus 33 for Keyonte George. Steals per game, edge goes to Maxey. Blocks per game, Maxey. Field goal percentage. Now, these are the comparable ones because the minutes don't affect this. 46.2% for Tyrese Maxey, 45.6% for Keyonte George. So that's a difference of 0.6. Obviously, that's very good for Tyrese Maxey, but the way people talk about Tyrese Maxey is so much different than Keyonte George, right? Winning team, bigger market, those all play a factor. But then the edge in 3-point percentage goes to Keyonte George. It's 0.4, what is it, 0.4 points better or 0.04, whatever it is. That's a slight edge to Keyonte George on the 3-point line, but the moral of this story is Keyonte George is closer to Tyrese Maxey, an all-star, all-NBA level, than people are giving him credit for. Effective field goal percentage, 0.04, edge goes to Tyrese Maxey. And then, like we said, the box plus minus and VORP goes to Tyrese Maxey. These things I think will go up for sure for Keyonte George next year. As he plays on a better team, improves defensively, the Jazz win more games, he will have just better numbers overall. Finally, the one that Jazz fans might have hoped that Keyonte George could become, it's actually not that much different than you think. So Donovan Mitchell compared to Keyonte George, I just want to look at minutes played by Donovan Mitchell, 33. So Mitchell, you got to give him credit. His efficiency is pretty phenomenal. So if Keyonte George can get to this level of play that Donovan Mitchell is playing at in terms of scoring, will be great. Edge goes to a 4-point edge to Donovan Mitchell in points, 4.5 rebounds per game more. Let's see. Almost a full rebound more for Donovan Mitchell than Keyonte George. But then you look here, Keyonte George has the edge in assists, and this will only go up as he sets up players like Peterson, Markkanen, and Jaren Jackson. Honestly, Keyonte George is going to walk into 5 assists per game. It's just going to be hard for me to not imagine him being at the 7. I would predict him around the 7 to 8 range in terms of assists if he's playing more pure point to set up his teammates. Steals per game edge goes to Donovan Mitchell. Blocks per game is identical. Donovan Mitchell, with his incredible athleticism and his just high-level scoring, 48% from the field compared to 45% from Keyonte George. That's a very nice advantage for Donovan Mitchell. 3 percentage points better. But then the 3-point percentage, once again, edge goes to Keyonte George, who is a much better 3-point shooter than people give him credit for. And I would argue he last year was easily, and this includes Lauri Markkanen, the best 3-point shooter on the Jazz, because he's not just taking catch and shoot threes, he's taking off the bounce threes as well, running pick and roll, pulling up when the defender goes under the screen, and he's knocking them down at 37% from the field. 89% at the free throw line, 3 percentage points better there for Keyonte George. He also, I believe, goes to the line more often. We'll look at that another day. But anyways, 3 percentage points from the free throw line, and then the box plus minus and VORP goes to Donovan Mitchell on the better team. So incredible stuff and potential for Keyonte George. And one thing I do want to mention here too is that we're hoping, like I said earlier, that this all can get better with one more leap. One more leap from Keyonte George. And there are all the signs that he is on his way to getting there. You look at the season stats for Keyonte George. He's a plus 2.7. The team is plus 2.7 better when he's on the floor on offense. 95th percentile. His efficiency, 61%. True shooting percentage, that's 77. That should get better. He's actually just so much better than people realize, and he's only going to improve. You look at this scale here. So these are his estimated plus minus numbers. This is from his 3 seasons in the league. you can see a trend here that's really exciting for Jazz fans. You can see the continued growth. You see it there. You see the continued growth here on this estimated plus minus graph based off of his stats. The arrows are pointing up on Keyonte George. And what I really liked here too was this shot chart. Keyonte George also is taking the best shots. He's a upper percentile in terms of at the rim and upper percentile from the three-point line. And he's taking those shots in these areas. And what's nice is he's taking them from various spots on the floor. He is taking these shots on both sides, which is an exciting thing to think about, that he can run pick and roll both sides of the floor, which means he should fit really nicely with Darren Peterson. They can run side pick and rolls on both sides of the floor. They can play an open 5-out offense where they can both isolate against whatever defenses they want. The Jazz offense is going to absolutely be a cannon this year. There is no question they have potential to be top 5, if not the best in the NBA. And that's not hyperbole. They have a real shot at being an absolute lights out offensive team. And it all comes back to Keyonte George, who has quietly been underrated in the national scale and even on the Jazz scale. Darren Peterson deserves all the hype that he is getting. Utah tanked for 4 years to get him. But in those 4 years that they were tanking for Darren Peterson, they also developed the perfect sidekick for him in Keyonte George. Utah's offense is going to be incredible. And if the defense can be top 15 and maybe top 10 if they are much more improved than we probably expect, then you could have a situation in Utah where you have an Isaiah Thomas and Joe Dumars type backcourt that can lead you to an eventual championship. All right, guys, like the video, subscribe to the channel. Thank you to the All-Stars and the members. Please make sure to like, follow, subscribe, and join. I will talk to you next time.